let's take a look at, so I've got this like sample application, which we'll go through in a few minutes, but specifically to Max's point, you have to like require your code from somewhere, right? Like you might be requiring the jQuery library from somewhere inside your application, like you've already downloaded it, minified it, or whatever. You might get it from a CDN, which is what's happening here. Yeah. You might even get it via a gem, right? Later, or some sort of prepackaged software that like comes with it already bundled inside. Yes, Eric.
Is one way better than the other?
I mean, so they all have advantages and disadvantages. The CDN way is like extremely easy because it's like, oh, I just put this line of code in my markup, and now I've got the things. Yay! The downside here is that like you've injected a huge dependency into your code base, right? Like, so if for some reason code.jquery.com goes down, or if they're under DDoS and things are responding very slowly, guess what else is responding very slowly, right? Like your company's website. You know what I mean? So yeah. Versus like taking the time to download it, incorporate it, and pull it in as a local file, right? Like now it's solid, it's on your server, it's always there 100%, but there's more setup in the beginning, right? So trade-offs. Yes, Danielle.
What is CDN?
Oh, content delivery network, maybe? I don't know.
Like, what does it actually mean? Because I just always hear that.
Yeah, I mean it's essentially a link to some code out on the internet. Content delivery network. Yeah, I totally got it. System of distributed servers that deliver web pages and other web content to users based on geographic locations to the user. Right? So like, it could be anything. You might hit the Bootstrap CDN to like pull the Bootstrap CSS and JavaScript library into your project. We saw in the example that we were hitting the jQuery CDN, right? Like any kind of software that you're going out and getting from the internet, it's prepackaged, and you're just able to like plug it right in. That's CDN.
So this uses a link, but if you like downloaded the files and then incorporated it locally, it wouldn't be.
That is not a CDN, right? Because that's a local serve of that like resource. Okay, cool. Oh no, we're all gonna burn. All right, I get it. Yeah, auditory probably comes before fan and physical comfort. It's a boot camp. Yeah. Right. Okay, so looking at the phase guide for today, what do we got? It's down here, the one that says Tuesday. That would be the one. You got some challenges, style editor, tabs, adding comments, orange trees, some resources. So who's watched the jQuery Basics and Intro to jQuery Talks? I got one hand. I got two hands. Oh, yay. All right, so this afternoon's stand-up topic is going to be a reiteration of how to prepare for the next day's content in phase 2. Just saying. Okay, great. And then here's a repo, Intro to jQuery with Hunter next to it, which links you over to the content for today's breakout. The README up front has a bunch of interesting information around jQuery, but the real meat is in the JS folder. So we'll get in here. I've just got it opened up here. And basically what we've got is we've got this index page with just a bunch of markup. We can go through this quickly if you want, just so everybody's on the same page. So here we're bringing in Bootstrap CSS from the Bootstrap CDN, yeah. And then we're also requiring custom CSS style sheets that I have written here under CSS styles.css. Is this big enough? Maybe better? There we go. And then a bunch of script tags, right? So script tag right off the bat for jQuery. Second script tag for jQuery UI, which is a subsection of jQuery. And then each of my individual JavaScript files that I'm running for this project are then required here, right? So 1 get started, 2 list, 3 advanced, 4 Ajax. I also, like if we were looking in the JavaScript folder, there's also a 0 main. I could include it right here, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to instead include that one at the very bottom. It'll be the last thing in my body. Can anyone tell me why I might do this? Yeah, Kev?
So it doesn't have to load the page every time?
Yeah, essentially. Have to, like, I want this JavaScript to be executed after everything else on the page is there and ready to go. This script, this 0 main, happens to be the one which contains my document.ready function, right? So obviously I want the document to be ready at that point, yeah? You'll see other folks like place JavaScript in different places, and really it's just something you should be aware of. That like were you to have the include tag or the script tag higher in the markup, you might get away with it or you might not. There might be issues with whether or not content is actually on the page when the JavaScript is executed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for me, I usually just throw that one down at the bottom. Yes, Daniel.
Is it good like format to I noticed you numbered your JS files. Is that so that like you remember?
No, not at all. Strictly for the purposes of this tutorial. It is good practice to name your files the way that like you want them to be, consumed. So, if I had one JavaScript file that was just like full of event listeners, I'd probably call that eventlistener.js. You know what I mean? But just like Ruby, right? Like we're not constricted to having we don't have to put all of our code in one file. We can break things out. We can like make it more modular and easier to read and all that jazz. Yeah, I'm just really like covering the basics at this point. Okay. So where to get started? I suppose I can get started in this get started function. I'm going to turn all this off. And then we'll take a look at this website that I built. Oh my God, it's the prettiest thing ever. It really is. Wait a minute. Let's go back to the markup. Let's finish going through the markup. So these are all our tags. Then we've got a body tag with a nav tag inside of it. A div. Yeah.
How do you just like cancel without actually clicking on it?
I hit escape. It's muscle memory at this point. Yeah. People at Sublime Text, if you're listening, change your purchase price to $29.95 and I will send you 20 licenses every 3 weeks. Just okay. Side rant. Div class, container fluid, then another div, right? So a lot of nesting going on here. Have you noticed that like this is becoming an apparent pattern like very quickly as you're moving into JavaScript land, right? Like the days of just, oh yeah, I threw this one div on the page. I'm going to do some stuff with that div. No. Your div is like nested under 3,600 other divs or something along those lines, right? So div main page, whoops. Then div container fluid, then div top section call mid 12. These are bootstrap classes. We'll cover that at some other point. And then here's an H3 with divs, div with a class of row, div with a class of an ID, div with a class of class, right? And on it goes. Down here, there's a unordered list with a class of awesome list. Down here, there's a div with an ID of existent, and some advanced methods, and Ajax land, and a footer, and then finally our bottom script tag. Okay, so there was no questions whatsoever on the markup. We're all good on that, right? Awesome. So let's go. All right, who can tell me? Let's just take a second before we actually dive into like the real code. Who can tell me? Like I said, basically what jQuery is, but like, what is it really? What do we use it for? Yes, Dave.
Is it to load things on a page without reloading the whole page?
Me.
Ajax, that's Ajax.
So Ajax is specifically a function within jQuery, and you can use Ajax to easily place elements on the DOM without having to reload the page. We'll cover that towards the end. Yes, Sean?
From what I understand, you can do anything with jQuery just using JavaScript, but jQuery is basically like a much more concise way of accessing different things on our DOM and being able to like use all these functions rather than type everything out using JavaScript.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. That's pretty good. Jason in the back?
And it allows us to manipulate the DOM. So the library is a set of pre-written JavaScript functions that allows us to access the DOM and manipulate it based on.
Okay, yeah, there's so it's a bunch of JavaScript methods. It's allowing us to access the DOM. It's allowing us to like manipulate the web page. It's allowing us to like place things on the web page, right? Like all those different. That's sort of like getting all around the edges at it. It's all about the DOM, right? jQuery is like 100% about like getting in, finding things that you're looking for on a given web page, manipulating those given things on a web page, right? Like updating the attributes, taking them away, showing them, hiding them, animating them, right? Like making them have like pretty sprinkles, whatever, right? Like all the things that make the internet classic. I could even use jQuery to like place a funny cat picture on the page, which I'll do at some point, I promise. You won't be disappointed on the funniness of the cat picture. Okay. So let's quickly, before we start looking at the code, let's go over and let's actually, you know what? Let's do actually the very first. Let's do this. Let's say, is it here? Yeah, so specifically to the point of jQuery being just a collection of JavaScript methods, we used to run a challenge in phase 3, which this is actually the first phase 3 since I've been affiliated with Dev Bootcamp that we're not running this challenge in phase 3 anymore. We're running a different challenge on lots of reasons. The new challenge is fun and exciting and like accomplishes the same thing without being a major total pain. This one's a major total pain. So this challenge is called mini query. It's still listed in the phase guide for phase 3. You can totally get after it, but it's a solid like 2-day challenge with a pair. And mini query is essentially like the challenge is asking you to rewrite like the functionality of 5 or 6 jQuery methods using plain vanilla JavaScript, thus like demonstrating that all jQuery is actually plain vanilla JavaScript, right? So like if I was, what do we got here? So like the hide function, show function, add class, remove class, on triggers. These are like event dispatchers, right? Like when something like hovers over this element, right? Like make it turn red or something along those lines. You can find this, I think, I think now that we're not running the challenge anymore, I've published it up on my GitHub. So if you're interested in that sort of thing. But you get the point, right? That like it's all just JavaScript. 100% of it's just JavaScript. And while I'm like on the subject, a slight rant, if that's okay. Is that okay? Nodding heads, great. There's going to be a lot of people in the world after you graduate that are going to tell you like how sexy and how awesome Angular, Ember, or React, or this, that, the other new hotness.js is. You should always maintain a comfortability and a level of familiarity with the baseline vanilla JavaScript language. Because if you're super comfy with regular old vanilla JavaScript, like you are framework agnostic, and that's a huge win, right? Like it doesn't matter what the new hotness is, right? Like it's still just JavaScript. So like if you're good with the base, then you're good for whatever. Okay, cool. So how's this JavaScript function file structured, right? Like this main is essentially just like a runner file, and it calls out to like the document ready calls out to several subfunctions, JS1, 2, 3, 4, which then further still call out to several subfunctions, right? And then like you can find each of these in like the corresponding file, right? So for those of you following along playing the home game, yeah, awesome. So let's go over to the first file. I've tried to build this in such a way that you can like, some of it's going to feel repetitive, right? And like some of the points are made kind of again and again, right? But like it's supposed to be so you can like follow along and sort of build one like progression upon another.
Repetition's good, Hunter.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Max?
I said repetition's good.
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Max?
I said repetition's good.
Oh, thanks.
It's a good teaching technique.
All right. Repetition's good?
Yeah.
All right. First off, right off the bat, jQuery is $, right? Like once you have the library included, you could write out jQuery longhand. You will 99.9% of the time see it referenced as $. Yeah? Okay, cool. It takes standard CSS selectors. This is a huge point. How many people are like feel like you've got a decent grasp on CSS selectors? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm gonna go with like 50%. You need to spend some time with CSS selectors. There's 2 links here, one for Tuts Plus and one for W3 Schools. That like just dive a little under the surface when it comes to CSS selectors. You use these things everywhere, right? Like CSS very often is sort of like put off as like the weird stepkid of programming, but like in actuality, right? Like the root navigational tool of CSS, its selector, is actually used all over the place in all kinds of different programming, like as the way that we like find and traverse elements within the internet, right? Like if you think back to phase 1 with the Nokogiri challenge, who remembers this? All about CSS selectors, yeah? Didn't have anything to do with jQuery. Same thing, jQuery, right? Like it's all about the CSS selectors as far as like finding and like getting to a specific thing within the page. The basic syntax goes, here we go. The basic syntax goes something like this, right? Like $ and then a selector, and then dot chaining on some action, yeah? So like $.class, where we pass the .class as a string. All good, right? Great. Do you want me just to like start whipping through and you can stop me when you have questions, or do you want me to like keep explaining things? I see thumbs up for whipping through. Keeps, God, oh, damn it.
We got you.
All right. I suppose I'll just figure it out on my own then. All right. You can also like set jQuery selectors to a variable, so that's very useful. So like here I've made a variable DOM class equals like this selection, and then I can consume that variable later in my program as long as I'm within the same scope, yeah, and be all good. There was a question earlier at stand up about debugging in JavaScript. So as far as like how you print things out in JavaScript, this is it. Console.log, right? And essentially what's happening here. P.S. and by the way, at this point in your like life cycle as a developer, you should pretty much have your Chrome DevTools open all the time. Like if I walk over and you're like debugging some problem this week, and I see that you don't like have your console open and you're not like actively looking in there as your first stop, I'm probably just gonna shake my head like this. Okay. Let's make this bigger. So, oh my God, I'm console logging like all the things. There's way too much here. But I can console.log. So like say if I did like var a equals yay. And now I can console.log a. And there it is, right? So like that's how that works. Any questions about that? You could also alert a if you want, which is more kind of obtrusive, but definitely harder to miss. Yeah. And then for debugging in JavaScript, oh my, I'm so sorry. Okay. Not bacon. I actually skipped breakfast. Maybe that's the problem. You can always insert breakpoint debugger in JavaScript right here with debugger. It's not like Ruby. There's no extra gem that you have to require or anything like that, right? Like just this keyword, debugger, and boom, you're in there. Bear in mind that debugger in JavaScript, so here's like a pro tip, is maybe not as solid as the previous breakpoint debuggers that you've been used to using. So it can be a little iffy at times. Like if you have like some variable that you're 100% sure exists, but then you like get into the debugger and you try to like console log it out in the console and it like keeps returning undefined. It maybe doesn't mean that your variable doesn't exist. It maybe means that like debugger is not operating correctly. You know what I mean? So that's just like a little tip. Right? Okay. Moving on. Here's a note about like what happens when we console log things, or specifically when we have jQuery variables, or just jQuery selections, right? It appears to be an array, right? Like if I was to this thing right here. Right, this thing appears to be an array. Right, it's got square brackets around the side of it. Yeah, right? Okay, it's not an array. It is known, it's a node list, right? Which looks an awful lot like an array and acts an awful lot like an array, but just the same way with Active Record, right? Where we had an Active Record collection proxy, looks a lot like an array, not an array, right? So you just may find some of the like prototypical functionality of an array that you might expect won't be there. So just a note for you. Okay, cool. Let's actually get into the things. So calls can be chained together, which is extremely useful. Yeah, we already talked about that. So,
what do you mean they can be chained together?
right. So what I mean by they can be chained together is I could say
Dot children.
exactly. Dot HTML like stuff. You know what I mean? So like we can just like keep drilling down and down and down, building off the result of the previous method as we go. Yeah. So we can use jQuery. Primarily, we're using it to select objects, at least right off the bat, like to select things from the DOM. But also like modifying things from the DOM is going to be very useful to you. So like in this example, I'm modifying the CSS of this element, which is all the children of the body, to have a font style of italic, right? So all the things on the page are italicized. Yeah? Whereas if I turn this off, they're standard. Okay, cool. And then, so the same way that like we just illustrated for Danielle that we can use method chaining to drill down in the DOM tree, we can also go up, right? This process of like drilling down or moving up or laterally, right? But like moving around in the DOM is called DOM traversal. And it's definitively one of the most powerful things that you're going to get out of jQuery right off the bat. But also like one of the more difficult things for beginners to like really become proficient with. Because it's just like a matter of time and practice and dedication to it, right? Like you get better at advanced CSS selectors, you get better at sort of looking at, like coming in here and like looking at the element tree and going, okay, well I'm here and I need to like get the ID from this thing up here, so I'll like just go up parents with a class of more class or something or another, right? Like just kind of glancing at things and sort of being able to see those relationships and paths. You know what I mean? Right? So that'll come in time. But this business of like going up the tree, right, like is also very useful. Yes?
Sorry for all the questions, but
Mhm.
could you scroll up to the JBody? So what's the advantage? Because earlier you said a jQuery variable as like variable $sign JBody. Now you're just using like a normal variable. Like, is there?
There is no advantage insofar as I'm aware. It's just like a signaling thing. So you're signaling to future you. Future you will be very appreciative probably. Also other developers on your team that like this variable is a jQuery variable, right? Like the thing which this variable evaluates to is a jQuery object. And that's important because regular DOM elements and jQuery selected DOM elements operate differently, right? Like I could have, so like say, var that equals this, and var that equals this, right? Like that and $that, very similar, right? Like they both evaluate to the same DOM element, or the same context rather, but also like very different because this one like contains already built into it all the inherent jQuery functionality that it can have, right? And this one doesn't. So like prepending the $sign is just a signal that like it's that type of variable. Cool. Moving on. So manipulating divs as a student, it's a good signal. Yeah. Maybe. This is not something you would like really do in production or like later, but as a student, it's probably a good idea for you to like add some console.log to your functions right off the bat. Like I think it's very helpful because especially like when we start later today dealing with event listeners and things of that nature, it's sort of like functions that only fire under a given set of circumstances, right? Like a console or an alert inside of there will let you know, like, oh yeah, this thing is actually happening the way that I thought it was going to. Yeah. Let's see. We're making a variable h1, which is going out to the DOM, and it's getting everything on the DOM, which has a tag of h1, and then it's setting the font size of all those h1s to be 2.5 EMs with a color of white. Yeah. So the takeaway here is that like specifically with the CSS function, we can pass it like what essentially is an options hash for multiple arguments. Right? We all good with the concept of an options hash? Great.
Can you explain it a little more?
I can. No more coffee. You'll see it referenced a lot out on the internet, like in documentation. Yeah, you just pass this options hash, right? So it's a hash, right, which evaluates to one argument in whatever method you're consuming it in, right? So it's a single argument to the method, but then within that hash, right, like is a multitude of key value pairs in which you can pass all the options that you need. Yeah. That's it. Yes, Sean.
So you could also just pass it one, like not even key value pair. You could just say like 2.5 EN or I don't know, whatever, like or property and value. Or you can also pass a function too.
For sure. Yeah. If we pass a function, what's that function called? We'll get into this a little later, but I just wanted to ask you now since you brought it up. If we pass a function to a function in JavaScript, a callback, sweet. Callbacks like seems like a thing where people are generally kind of like, ooh, that sounds messy and scary and not okay. But in actuality, they're hands down terrific. So callback is the ability for you to pass a function as an input to another function, right? And then like within, so function. And then like within this function, we could like execute this other function which we received as part of our input, right? So like we might have like, if some stuff, right? Then like we fire this other function from this other place. Yeah. So being able to like chain this functionality together is terrific. Clear? Great. So we're doing some CSS, some more CSS. There's a before function, which is really nice. So like saying everything on the DOM which has a class of class and is an H1, I'm going to insert before it an H3 tag with the text of insert sibling directly before class. Did that happen? Insert sibling directly before class. It totally happened. And here's a note about conditionals. So jQuery gives you a .each functionality, which is super duper useful for those of you coming from Ruby enumerable land. And so your each functionality has an index and like the element which it's currently iterating over. So it's an each with index from Ruby, right? Where element in this case, or the second argument, the second input, is the block param, if you're thinking of it that way, right? Questions about each? All right, whatever. Yes?
So can you make those params anything you want?
You can totally make them whatever you want. This could be flapjacks. And this could be fuzzy nuffers. Right?
But
Or,
no, it'll break.
I would say schnozberries, but I don't know how to spell schnozberries. What's that?
But it'll break because like 5.5, yeah, calls without log.
Well, sure, yeah. If I were to change the name of my inputs up here, I would need to change them all down here in order to like show that they actually work. But it can be in Java, you can name these inputs whatever you want in JavaScript. Good?
Oh, can you explain what was the arguments?
Oh, nice. Excellent. So in JavaScript, you have a keyword called arguments. Arguments will display to you all of the inbound inputs which are coming to your function, right? So if you're not sure about all the things that you have access to in some function coming in, right? Like you can just console log arguments and you'll know. Let's see if we refresh this over the console and tell you what, let's do this. Let's be nice to ourselves. There we go. All right, where's it at? Oh, here? I don't think that matters. But this isn't going to play nicely because it needs to be in its own. It was there, but it wasn't clickable. Now it's clickable, right? So arguments here, I can open it up, right? Like it looks like this array thing. It has two elements inside of it. The first element at position 0 is integer 8. The second element at position 1 is a div element, right? So these are the arguments that are coming into my function. I've named them, in this case, index and element. But if I wasn't sure, if I wasn't sure what order they were coming in, or just what all I had access to, am I actually getting this input that I think I'm getting, anything along those lines, right? Like arguments is a great place to go, because I can just see like the raw, what have I got? It's the same thing as like peeing params on a route in Sinatra. Yeah.
So when you just said this array thing, did you literally, is it not an array? Is it like that node?
Yeah, it's a node list.
object thing?
That's correct.
Up there on the function inputs for index and element, where are those actually coming from?
So these are coming from the each method, right, within jQuery. Yeah. So this each functionality expects its callback function to take these two parameters, right? And it's sending to this interior function these two parameters from each of the things which it got from this collection. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, moving on. This is the last thing on page 1, and then we'll get into stuff that is maybe actually cool, I promise. Maybe. All right, this is an important note on conditionals in jQuery. So like up here at the top, I've got this if, and then I say jQuery select a div on the page with an ID of non-existent. This is no good because this code will run, right? Console log conditionals, this shouldn't be here. If we go out and we check, oh god, let's turn off the other thing. All this, go away. All right, conditionals, this shouldn't be here, right? So this non-existent thing, I'm not going to go and like pour over the markup, but you can just trust me. There is no div on the page with an ID of non-existent. I named it that way because it's non-existent, right? So and yet, like the code inside of it is still executing. This is because of the way that jQuery works, right? Like if it doesn't find something on the page, like if you call out and say, hey jQuery, give me all the things with like this ID, and it finds nothing, what does it return? No. No. It returns an empty node list, right? An empty node list is truthy. So in a conditional statement, that then evaluates to true, right? So that doesn't work out. If you want to use a conditional around a jQuery selection, you can do this, right? jQuery select something from the page and then pass it a dot length. You could also be more explicit and say where dot length is greater than 0, but you can get away with just the dot length is fine. And now the conditional works properly. Good. Okay, moving on. Yeah. All right, so let's just maybe we should Sharif this thing. Let's just like look at it really quickly. So some functions on the page here. I've got add items to list, mod some list text, add numbers, nth child, a standard listener, a delegated listener, and a list listener, and that's what's on the page. Okay, so those are the functions. So it sounds like we're doing a bunch of stuff with list, which probably makes sense because we're in the file called list. Right? Okay. So add items to a list is going to be a function which takes no input. And we're going to look down and get some sub-elements. So we're going to go to our markup and we're going to get this thing called awesome list and assign it to a variable, list. Then we're going to go back to the markup again and make a variable called list item, which correlates to that same list, but its first child, which is a list element, right? So just passing a little more advanced CSS selector here so I can go and get the thing that I wanted. Yeah. And then, let's see, for, so this is a for loop, right? Var I equals 0, I less than or equal to 5, I plus equals 1, do some stuff. What are we doing? List.append, list item.clone. So the result here is that where we have just 2 items. All right, I need to turn this on. Boom. Where we had just 2 items before, now we've got 7 items, right? Because I added 5 items to the previous 2. Does this make sense? Yeah? Great.
What does dot clone mean?
So dot clone is taking some element from the page and like literally cloning that element, right? So it's all of its attribute, like you're just taking this element and it's like the same as a deep dupe in Ruby, right? So like you get all the attributes like classes, IDs, tags, listeners, all the things, right? So we're making a copy of it essentially.
So if you didn't clone it, it would actually remove it from awesome list.
If I did this instead, let's find out. Yeah, I only got the 2 things, right? Because it can't add this thing to the list because this thing is already on the list. So it can't do it, right? So it has to be like a copy of it. Cool. Okay. Useful methods for reading DOM content. So this should be useful, right? If you have an element selected, you can call .text on it, or .html or .val, right? Like they'll all return you different things, which you should be aware of the differences here. The key point I want you to take away from this is like these are readers, right? This is a writer. That's the difference. Cool?
So like if it has anything within that.
Yeah, so like if you're just calling the method without any arguments, then it's a reader. If you pass an argument to it, now that reader becomes a writer. And you're like, oh, now we're updating this value instead. Yeah? So in this function, mod list text, we're taking all the items which are within all the list items on the page, and we're changing them from item to list item, right? And that's it, just like swath, done.
Sorry, wait, what were the other useful methods? There was text, HTML, and
Val. Yeah. Add nums basically does the same thing, right? Like it's getting like the list and then iterating over the list and adding a number to each one. So it's just like an advanced iteration here. Cool. Moving on. Child. So here I'm just like showing you how you can look up a specific element. I'm going to stop explaining these so much because like I want you to really, like the point here is for you to use them as a reference. You know what I mean? Okay. jQuery is super great for event handling. Common events include click, double click, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse down, mouse up, hover, and focus. Yeah, you'll be using these a lot. So event binding. Here's a good link for you to read up on this. But essentially the moral of the story is we want to use JavaScript to listen for things to happen within the DOM, right? So like when a user clicks on clicks on the funny cat, right? Like they get a pop-up window that says, hey, wouldn't you like to experience more funny cat videos in your email? Please enter your email here and we'll hook you up. Right, or something along those lines, right? So we want, whenever something happens, we want to like trigger some other JavaScript event to happen. Yeah. This is the standard listener that you'll see probably in your challenges, right? Where you're saying jQuery some element, right, which is the target of the listener, and then the on function, where you pass it an event, and then the callback function, right? So find this thing on the page, and whenever that thing is clicked, fire the callback function. We're clear on how that works? Yes, Sean?
This, in this case, just calls back onto whatever's wrapping around this, right?
This in this case would be the context of the click event, right? So like whatever was clicked on the page, the specific LI element.
And then it'll print like the object and whatever the attribute, like the properties of that or something.
Well, let's find out. So this in this case is, it's the element, this list item, right? Class item, style, background, all the stuff, list item 2. It's the one I clicked on. I could click on number 5. Now, down here is the one for, oh, maybe. Why did it only do it once? I'm confused. I don't know. Strange. Moving on. There absolutely has to be questions about event handlers and click handlers. I don't believe you that you know all the things at this point. Okay, you should.
I don't know what
Yeah,
to
I
ask.
don't know what we don't know.
I haven't tried it yet.
So we could probably come up with our own reference list of the standard listeners and what events can happen to them. That would be a great place to start for referencing them, yeah.
What is that?
Okay. What are we looking at?
You messed with the Ajax example.
The Ajax example is not sanitized, so like depending on the search input that you put in.
I typed in red panda sneezing and I got this weird picture.
Okay, moving on. Well, so we'll go ahead and move on to like this other pattern here. So you're gonna find something. You're gonna encounter a problem really quickly with jQuery, which is the following. jQuery is executed when the document is ready, right? Like we had some tag earlier where it was like document.ready, and we started doing a bunch of stuff on the page, right? What happens if you've got a user on the page and they like click a button, it's like sign me up. And that button like puts a form on the page with a bunch of things to sign them up, right? That form wasn't on the page when the document was first ready. Is everyone still with me? Yeah? Because the form wasn't on the page when the document was first ready, any event listeners or click handlers or whatever, right, that were set up when the page was first ready don't know about it, right? Because they all executed when the page, right, like this code up here, this executed when the page was when it was loaded on document ready. So, if I had, crazy awesome form, right? But I appended this to the page after the fact. This listener doesn't know about it, won't see it, right? Because jQuery comes in, it looks for this at document ready. It doesn't see that this is the thing that exists, so it just moves right along, right? Can't call on undefined, right? So it just like moves along with its life, and this a listener in its entirety then becomes like a moot point. The answer to this is something that like you'll make use of later in the week, but I just wanted you to be exposed to it right now, is something called a delegated event listener, right? So the moral of the story here is that in a delegated event listener, the thing that you listen to is something that is on the page when it is first loaded, right? So like every element on the page has probably some parent, right? Like at some point, you're going to encounter like a parent that was on the page when the page was first loaded. We're clear on this? So the difference here is that I attach, in a delegated event listener, I attach the on handler to the parent, some static parent, yeah? Pass it the same like functionality that I was planning on passing it before, click in this case, but then an additional second argument that the first one didn't have, yeah? And what happens is when the page is first loaded, this whole thing runs. jQuery goes and finds like this parent. It finds the parent. It's like, sweet, I got that. I know about that. It attaches the the handler to that parent for click events. Yeah, and that's the end of the story. The triggering of that event, which is the opposite, the other side of the coin, right? When the event is triggered, so anytime anything on the page, which is an unordered list, is clicked, right? It's going to check, hey, is the thing that was just clicked a list item and an anchor tag? Is it these things? If it is, then fire the callback function. If it isn't, then we just like move along, right? That little bit of trickery, in effect, gives you the ability to have dynamic listeners on the page. Because like this evaluation is happening in real time when this event happens over here. Yes.
Can you explain the significance of why you have event in the first function parentheses, not the second one, as opposed to the previous example?
It's just bad hunter. That's what it is. That's the significance of it. I'm not great at this sometimes.
Would that have worked anyways?
I don't think so. Yes.
So for your delegated event listener, when you are clicking on the unordered list, if what you click on is the list, then it will do the things? Or
Yeah, so
when you click on an unordered list, it'll do things to the list?
anytime, so the way this is working, I don't expect you to fully grasp this right now. I just wanted you to like see it. Anytime anything on the page which is an unordered list is clicked, this fires, right? But the triggering event checks, because we're passing it this additional argument, it checks at that point, hey, is this thing which was just triggered, does it happen to be a list item that is an anchor tag? Oh, it is? Sweet. Run this callback function. Oh, it isn't? I don't care. Move along.
So is this pointing to list?
This will still be pointing to the specific item which was clicked.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's basically like if you want to do things to a different part of your DOM, right? Because you're like, your target is something different than what you're clicking on.
No. All right, let's move along. In the interest of time, I'm sorry. You'll get there.
I have office hours.
Okay, great. And then like there's another list listener down here, which is a downright terrible example, and it even says so up top. It's a terrible example, right? But like it allows me to do like all kinds of different listeners: mouse enter, mouse leave, click, right? All kinds of like different functionality. I'm going to turn the rest of this back on. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to reload this page. So here's all the things that I did with jQuery, right? Like we've got some highlighting going on. When I click a thing, it like changes its color. I've got some event listeners for images down here. So like when I hit the images button, I get pictures, including a funny cat and Millie. When I click on Millie, Millie goes away. When I click on Aaron, Aaron goes away.
They just start disappearing out of the class.
Right. When I click on Meowsers, things Meowser. Ooh. And then there's an Ajax example at the bottom where I've got a form and I can like reach out to the internet and I could say,
Yeah, don't do red panda.
I'm going to do clean.
Red panda sneezing does not come up with a red panda.
Scott, I was so scared when I scrolled down on this one here because I thought clean would be like it's a safe bet. You know? And I started scrolling and I'm like this is not gonna go well. It's only happened once, like a random lookup from the internet like really burned me during a lecture. And like I've been emotionally scarred for it forever. Just like I can't trust the internet. I'm going to get like an HR complaint. Damn internet.
Damn internet, I'm ready
Okay, I'm not going to go through any of the rest of this because I feel like it's past your pay grade for today. Well, because it is, right? Like you need to go and play with it for a little while. We only made it through like the second file, so there's an additional advanced file here and an additional Ajax file. You should, however, like just the markdown up front in the README has a ton of good links at the bottom and some basic explanation of different things. So you should be referencing this throughout the day. And if you need like a pointer to like how the code works, you can dive back into this repo and like take a look at the code. And then like once you start getting comfortable with the baseline things, take a look at that third and fourth file and start like seeing how some of the more advanced concepts come together. Questions before we break? Yes.
So right now we're with JavaScript and jQuery. It's kind of just playing with single pages. Or this is like
I don't quite understand. Can you elaborate?
trying to see because like with like our routes and our ERB files, we're playing with things on like in our index.erb, right? So like is JavaScript kind of like that? It's just like you're playing with the index, but writing in JavaScript.
I mean, you're playing with whatever it's whatever page is, your JavaScript can run on whatever page is currently displaying to the user, right? And you can have JavaScript that only runs on certain pages, and then JavaScript that doesn't run on others, right? Or you can have JavaScript that runs on every page of your entire site, right? Like it's all up to you as the developer as to how you set those things up.
Oh, that's why you call it like .erb or .js on the page, right?
I don't.
Like the views, like with like if it's on like the views controller, like where would this file go?
Oh, in the views. Okay, so in the views controller, you would still call your .erb, right? Because your .erb is the view. We're not currently generating any kind of view with JavaScript, right? Like JavaScript is just working with the things that were already existing that were like handed out by the server, right? So like if we had some view like users/index.erb, right? Like that comes from the server. It's just users/index.erb, right? It's just ERB from the server that like you wrote, no JavaScript, right? Like server compiles that, pushes it out. Now it's got some JavaScript that's running on it, right? Because maybe you have like a JavaScript tag in your layout or something like that. Yeah. And so now users index like something in your JavaScript from that layout page is like looking for certain elements on that page and then doing things with them. That's how that works. Clear? Yeah.
So these notes are going to be available to us?
They're totally available to you.
Um,
BootCoder/jQueryIntro. Have at it.
But did you make like a bunch of edits to it?
I mean, I sort of changed things as I was like playing around and displaying it, but no, you're fine. Yeah. Okay, anything else? You gonna go have fun? Go have fun.
Thanks.
Have a great
For
time.
recording.